Schröder turns the corner, got to the rim, floats it up and banks it in!
Welcome back, guys. Good to see you again. Looking forward to breaking down another great Thunder performance from this season. And it's with our guy, Dennis Schröder, second half Schröder as he's known as. And he did it once again. A huge performance in the second half down in Orlando against the Magic in a 120-114 victory. He had 22 in the second half, big-time jumper at the end of the game. Your thoughts, guys, just on the way that he controlled the flow, particularly in that second half. Let's start with you, Chris.
Well, yeah, I think you got to go back to the game before on the road trip in Houston where he had sort of the game-sealing shot to put that big win on the road in the books for the Thunder. And I think that confidence kind of carried over into this game. It was 2 days later. Orlando was a very good defensive team, a top 5 defensive team coming in. And what really stood out to me was Dennis in the first quarter didn't even look for his shot. He was looking to get other guys involved. He was distributing the basketball, particularly to 𝐓𝐚𝐠𝐢𝐜. And I think that kind of allowed him to sort of get his feet under him for the remainder of the game. And then in the second half, the offense just absolutely exploded. I mean, he didn't score until 120 into the second quarter and put up 20 points in the final 15 minutes. And for Dennis Schröder, he is a guy that we know that can microwave offense in a hurry. And it happened again in the second half. And for the second consecutive game, he knocks down a jumper to help seal a victory. It came with 32 seconds left in a game that really was against one of the better defensive teams in the NBA.
He plays with such a swagger that belies his size, his stature. But the thing to me about that game that I remember most is the team had 0 offensive rebounds. You just don't see that during the course of an NBA game, and yet they were undeterred by that. This was a game they controlled, and Dennis was a massive factor in that with the 31 points, which matched the season high. And as you said, Chris, he really was actively involved, getting teammates involved early in the game. And he knew 𝐚𝐠𝐢𝐜 would have to play a significant role in that game, given the Thunder's limitations on their front line, and really saw to that. 𝐚𝐠𝐢𝐜 had 14 points, and Dennis took the game over in pockets, scoring 11 in the second quarter, 11 in the fourth quarter to finish the job. But you just have the sense in the flow of that game that he was in control, a lot like Chris Paul had been in a lot of the season for the Thunder. And that's really one of the things that made this team unique during the course of this season is they had multiple leaders on the floor that could assert themselves this way. The other thing about Dennis, and Michael, I want to get your thoughts on this, is to me, he's the most unique player in the NBA based on, 1, his efficiency scoring the ball this season, and 2, his willingness to pick guys up full court. He's energized all the time, and he impacts both sides of the ball, which is something he's not done during his career until now.
You're right, Matt. That takes a lot. I mean, first of all, when you got a guy who's willing to expel just as much energy on the offensive end as he is on the defensive end. Now, I had no idea he was that committed. Just over the course of the season, you start going, wait a minute. Now, he's doing this every single game, pressing the guy in the backcourt, and then he's going to handle a lot of the offensive load. So that's what we really learned, I think, at this point, that he's very consistent. And that's what he's going to give you. Now, when you talk about that particular game down in Orlando, I mean, that was a really tough game because you didn't have Steven Adams, first of all. Now, Matt, you brought up the no offensive rebounds. You know, they didn't have a Michael Cage. They did not have a Steven Adams that night. So, in all fairness, but, you know, that 3-guard lineup, I thought that was on display, especially when you talk about how effective they were. CP3 and Shea, but you know, you're right. The man of the moment that particular night, shooting 60% from the field, was Dennis Schröder, and I thought that he showed that he could carry the team when he needed to, and he could do the things to help close out games, make big shots, make plays. And I think that when you talk about getting that win down in Orlando at the time was still thinking playoffs. They were in that 8th spot by a fingernail.
Mike, Orlando was one of the best defensive teams in the league coming into that game, yet time and again, Dennis just completely abused the mismatches that he got. Nikola Vucevic, Mo Bamba, they tried to switch those coverages there, and Dennis either had a blow-by drive or he just confidently set up his man and hit a jump shot, hit a number of threes over top of those guys. And really, that's something that he's done all season long. As you look at Dennis's year in totality, I mean, obviously he's a guy that is in the running for 6th man of the year. What stands out to you about the way that he performed all year long?
You mentioned he added the three-point shot with consistency. And Michael, let me interrupt, but 44% on the road, guys. I mean, in essence, you earn your stripes and you cement yourselves solidly in terms of what you can generate come playoff time by winning tough road games. This is one of those swing games against a team, Michael, as you said, that's sub 500, but really capable at home. They were winning 65% of their games at home and really leaned on their defense. But Dennis shot a career high, nearly 47% from the floor to this point in the season, and added a reliable three-point stroke. That was an element of his game that was not consistent leading into the season. To his credit, he worked tirelessly to make it a weapon he could go to at critical moments in games. And when you add that to the quickness and the burst he has off the dribble and the mid-range stroke, he's an excellent foul shooter. He's a really tough matchup.
Matt, you brought up too, and I'm going to go back to what you just said about he's one of those unique players who plays on both sides. I mean, that's rare. I mean, to have a guy who's averaging 19 points a game, and he's would average four assists on the season, and then just under 3 rebounds. You got a guy like that who knows when to step up when you're shorthanded, who knows his role. Keep in mind, Schröder has been pretty much a super sub off the bench for the Thunder his entire career. Now he's been pressed into service by default to start, and he's been no different. And I think that's the thing that really surprised me about Dennis Schröder. He's only 26 years old, so that he could be called to start, produce, go back to the bench, produce. That's tough to do. I mean, especially when guys put so much value sometimes in starting. Billy Donovan made it clear about 2 seasons ago. He doesn't look at as the first starting 5 guys as starters. He looked at the first 8 or 9 as all one piece. And I think Dennis Schröder got that figured out by now.
Yeah, I think you guys are talking a lot about sacrifice. And with just one start on the season in 63 games, that's what we saw from Dennis from the very beginning. And I also go back to kind of the very beginning of the season when he and the 3 guards went into Billy Donovan's office and said, hey, look, how are we going to figure this unique situation out where all 3 of us are ball handlers and all 3 of us have a very unique skill set? And what did it do? It translated into them having the second best 3-player lineup in the NBA in the fourth quarter in terms of net rating, just behind a 3-group lineup in Utah. And that's one of the reasons why they won games. Now, individually, Dennis Schröder, as Matt said, was excellent shooting the basketball. He had career highs in field goal percentage, 3-point field goal percentage, 2-point field goal percentage. And it was automatic in the mid-range from the start of the season to that game in Boston. So many different things that Dennis would bring, like picking up full court, playing 31 minutes a game. Those are the kind of things that you just can't quantify. So he was excellent for the Thunder all year.
Chris, while you're rewinding back to the beginning of the season, I want to rewind a little bit further. And I think that Dennis's mindset changed back in the 2019 playoffs when he saw what happened, that Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum, they're coming off of screening actions and they're knocking down shots coming off the dribble. And I remember him saying in those end of season interviews, his number one objective was, I've got to be a better shooter off the dribble from behind the 3-point line. And we saw his efficiency from behind the arc rise as a direct result of learning firsthand what it's going to take in the postseason to beat some of these high-level squads. And I think that leads me to my final question for all you guys. What kind of impact did you foresee Dennis having moving forward in this 2019-20 season, particularly looking at the postseason?
Well, first of all, guys, I think that when each year you get smarter, you get wiser. How do you get better if you're Dennis Schröder? You know what? You just keep getting more polished at what you do. And I think that that's what I was looking forward to seeing, a more polished Dennis Schröder. Look, I am what I am. You know what I can do. I've shown you I can play defense. And in playoff basketball, the game shortens, possession shortens. So you got to value everything. He has a very, very efficient game. If you look at a lot of his games, a lot of times, he's shooting close to 50% or more from the field. Now, he finished the season at 46% shooting from the field, 38% shooting from the 3-point line. He averaged 19 points. Almost was your leading scorer off the bench. That's what you love to see in playoff basketball. You talk about he is as advertised. that's what you can count on. I think coaches can really make game plans for the playoff knowing they got a guy that's so consistent.
I'm going to up that a level, Michael. I think he was much better than anybody could have envisioned this season for this team. And I think it's a major part of the reason 40-24 is the record at this point, 68 games or 64 games in. The things that he has done to impact both sides of the ball, I don't think we could have foreseen. I mean, he came into the NBA and had to earn minutes on the defensive end, so everybody knew he had that capacity. But once he fell in love on the offensive side of the ball, that went away in Atlanta. So coming to Oklahoma City, there was a bit of a reacclimation process to that in his first season 2 years back. This season, though, he really took it upon himself. And I know Mo Cheeks had a conversation with him early in training camp about what is your role? What do you envision? And how do you envision impacting winning for this team this season, given the fact that you're going to be coming off the bench? And I fall back, guys, on, for some of us, Michael Cage, we peaked in high school. So my high school coach, it's not about who starts, it's about who finishes. And Dennis ensured he was on the finishing five every game this season with Oklahoma City because of the steady work he'd done on his game. And I think the recognition that this is an opportunity. Look, Dennis plays with a chip on his shoulder. He always has. And I think he recognized and he sort of embodies for this team the fact that they carried a chip on their shoulder this season because they were so overlooked nationally. I think that really fueled what we saw from him. And he is, without question in my mind, the sixth man of the year in the NBA.
Well, certainly agree on the six-man worthiness for Dennis Schröder. But if there's something that really stood out to me, and Billy Donovan's talked about it a lot, is the sort of the inner fire of Dennis Schröder. He is as competitive as anybody in this league. I will take that, and I'm sure anybody in this league would take that going into the postseason every single season. I mean, the scoring was going to come. He averaged over double digits last year. You expect to see that from a guy like Dennis, especially in those crunch time minutes. But that competitive fire, that competitive spirit, you want that in the postseason.
And you have to have it in the final 5 minutes of these clutch time games in a postseason type situation. As you guys are mentioning, he was finishing these games, and the reason why, he was accepting the defensive challenges, and he was able to physically play up a position defensively in those three-guard lineups. That was absolutely critical. Guys, had a great time talking about the German lightning bolt. We'll talk to you guys again soon.